Hi guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video, we'll look into a scenario in which it's 1980 and the Cold War goes hot, or turns into an actual war. And let's talk about strategy. So what I see as a good strategy, and what I think this Warsaw Pact would do would be invade into Greece and Turkey, invade into West Germany, probably not Norway, because there would be very little ground able to make because it's all mountains. Well, NATO at first would be trying to hold off the ground from a Soviet offensive. They might lose Turkey and Greece, which are two major countries, but really the only major country in the Warsaw Pact is Russia, who puppets all these nations. So if NATO can get into these countries and start invading, the people start rising up, chances are, and eventually they'll move into Russia. And Russia with a lot of minorities like Ukrainian, Baltic countries, Belarusian, Armenian, Georgians, Azeris, Kazakhs will all probably start revolting. And let's see. I just realized something. This is bad. One part of the screen, which was a bit of a problem. That's why I didn't see the full thing. But good thing we weren't starting the mapping yet, or that would have been disaster if I had the mapping started while that was going on. Also, let's keep an eye. Look, see? Right here. I would say this would be the first offensive. Which I think the goal of this offensive is to make it to the Rhine. Which France, Italy, and America right now is sending troops over. Obviously, America is involved in this. I'm just showing Europe because that's really the main theater. There are definitely more theaters, but Europe is the better one, probably. With an offensive up to here, and they're trying to get to the Rhine River. With Czechoslovakia's puppet government sending an offensive in. Imagine there's a repeat of the Prague Spring in this video. But anyways, let's see what happens in Bulgaria. Bulgaria launches an offensive into Greece and Turkey. You may think, why would Turkey fall that fast to Bulgaria? Because Russia at this time was also making an offensive in the east. Russia's allies, per se at this point, is really Iraq and Iran. Syria. Yeah, the 70s is when Iran turned, yeah. So Iran, Iraq, and Syria, these nations would support the West. With Turkey in a lot of trouble as they lost one of their major cities. The Soviets at this point not concerned about invading Italy. With them moving towards the Rhine, and instead of crossing into the French territory, they just pause at the French border. Southern Germany being the last to fall, with the West regretting it not letting Germany have a big military, with West Germany soon being just the Rhine River. And this sets the page for a Dutch invasion, which ends up getting them about here. A stalemate is achieved there on that front. Them not wanting to go further into Greece because that would be dangerous considering Yugoslavia is enemy. Not enemy per se, but a trading partner, an ally kinda, more so pro them. But like they're a neutral country, so Russia can't just get them to move and let them move through. They won't allow Russian troops, nor will Austria, because Austria had to be. With a breakthrough in the west, a crossing of the Rhine River. The fall of the Netherlands. The first country to fall has been the Netherlands. Belgium is basically fallen. With Belgium falling before Germany. Just because the terrain is better, I guess. I don't know why they would invade like that. With France being, with the forces pushing into France. That's basically what's happening to Turkey. With the Russian forces also in the Warsaw Pact forces. With Russia trying to get some allies involved at this point. Including their major Middle Eastern allies. With America going to probably as Middle East allies soon. But at this point they choose not to, as they know at this point, after this invasion they hope, they will be weaker, so they know to invite their allies when it's more convenient, better timing, strategic. Strategic entrance. Yep, that's what I'm going to call it. With forces moving down towards Paris. But at this point, American troops, British troops, start arriving to the front in huge numbers. And the Russians are pushed back. They're pushed out of French territory and into the Rhine. The French forces go. With these forces managing to move up like this, so a lot of Soviet forces flee the Rhine and Benelux because they decide to go up along the Rhine River first. With their offensive going really well, and they manage to get all the way to the Rhine, and this is embarrassing and humiliating for the Russians. But the Russians decide to do something else, with the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact deciding to go north. With the generals of the Soviet Union's decision to invade Denmark being a good one, as it makes it so that they can't secretly attack in there unless their subs can get away undetected. With a big offensive happening at Turkey, Bulgaria sending tens of thousands of troops along with the Russians. And Turkey's in a lot of trouble. They're basically in checkmate at this point. So now they get invaded around Ankara. Their fall begins. With Turkey at this point being forced to surrender because of how big of an attack this was. They start moving into Greece. With the fall of Greece being a big deal. Although at this point the Russians start disrespecting countries' neutrality. As they ask for their forces to cross through Austria, Austria is like, no, you can't. The Russians, the Soviet Union, decides to invade neutral Austria, which makes a lot of the neutral countries upset, including Yugoslavia. With the mountains of the area being hard for Soviets to get across, Italian troops and French troops meet up along a narrow corridor. That's not being a big deal, and to get through, the Russians now start asking Yugoslavia for access to Italy. Yugoslavia refuses, despite being a Russian ally, they're neutral, they state. With Russian forces invading. This being a big deal, mostly for the Americans. With Finland seeking the opportunity to take land from Russia. When I was playing a game, I destroyed Yugoslavia, despite Yugoslavia being a good country. And so on. Yugoslavia refuses to surrender, with Yugoslav forces still fighting, with the Russian forces still having to deal with Yugoslav forces. All kinds of stuff. So they're struggling to get through. They may have made a bad decision. And them trying to get different nations to join, including Finland and Sweden. That doesn't work so well. But they decide to make a landing in northern Denmark. And they move across. The Russians weren't expecting this. With NATO forces arriving in Yugoslavia to hopefully stop the front from falling. And, well, they managed to take a huge swath of Yugoslavia back. Not all of it, but a huge swath. But this is where some strategic losses in Yugoslavia happen. With Russia getting pro-Russia people, NATO using pro-NATO people in this territory start fighting for each side. With this being a big deal. But at this point, with the front starting to collapse in Germany, a big offensive is made. They call this the Hamburg offensive because it goes towards Hamburg. With the border of East Germany being met up with the first German forces. With Germany attempting to make a big encirclement. But this is where the Russians flee the scene. Like this. They're right out. As they fall out of Denmark. Although they get to keep one of Denmark's islands. With the focus on liberating territory. And then they start pushing back some of the Russian offensive. With supply lines being opened well through Austria and into Yugoslavia, but this had the risk. The Soviets made a last offensive basically into Germany, which actually goes well. Moving into Benelux again. But at this point, Germany and allies decide to go up through here, encircling this big swath. These forces try to flee, but are ultimately too late and get captured. A lot of them trying to flee get captured over here. With Russia at this point being in a bad spot. With Albania being Albania, and won't join because they're neutral. But that's okay because no Greek territory is still occupied. With a major group of soldiers, probably 50,000 or 100,000, moving in down here. And a bunch of troops moving over here. Hundreds of thousands of troops. Soon this troop count reaches about 500,000 on the border of this. There's probably 2-3 maybe more million forces. The Russian offensive into Norway being outlandish. With them moving in, but this is like really, like as if that would work. With Norway having the advantage on the ground because of geography, they kicked the Russians out. The Russians try to get Finland to help them, but Finland refuses. And also refuses to collaborate with NATO forces yet. Because they don't think it's in their best. With America at this point deciding to call its allies in, which in the Middle East at this point their allies were this. But now the Soviet Union gets another ally, someone who's on the map. Yep, some country that's on the map. That's not really a country, but is a country depending on who you ask. As the fall of Darmkis and Syria, and the invasion by the Middle East allies. This is also done by a lot of American troops. With Franco's Spain just having nothing better to do, so NATO pressures him into declaring war on Russia. Yep, a dictator. I think it's still a dictator in 1980, or maybe he was overthrown. Somewhere around there. Not overthrown, but dead. Kind of thing. With the fall of Berlin. Oh wait, West Berlin fell a while ago. But now the fall of all of Berlin. With the crossing in the Polish borders, Soviets do whatever they can to prevent rebellions. But this is a stalemate up there, basically. With the US making an advance into some islands in the Mediterranean. And in southern Greece they enter. With this island becoming one of their strong islands. With an offensive to take back northern Yugoslavia beginning. With northern Yugoslavia eventually coming under the hands of the control of NATO. With NATO having major offensives. With Poland at this point about to declare independence. With Polish forces declaring the independent Polish Republic over here. The independent Polish Republic being in this area, they start a war on NATO's side as they start declaring the Polish Republic. But the Soviets don't like this, and to prevent other rebellions tries to crush this rebellion. But it's no use because NATO forces are already arriving in. NATO started a bigger offensive into Poland after these rebels started because what they're hoping for is the House of Cards Russia is to start falling apart, I guess. Because think of it, with Russia being the way it is, it's easy for Russia oppressing everyone to have rebellions. With the Polish Republic taking over all of what Poland was and declaring war on Russia. But don't worry about that, Russia says, as Russia invades in the south. And basically, they take huge swaths of Polish land. Some of the lands Poland declared independent. But Hungary, different places in Russia get inspired. Or start to get inspired. With Yugoslavia probably would have accepted the USSR's terms, but didn't. Because I don't think it would. And then landing here by NATO forces. Let's see how far the offensive in this area got in this time in Iraq. Well, at this time they're basically pushing towards the Turkish border, and in Iraq, well, this is happening. And then Iraq in Syria gives up. I might have a mistake, because I'm starting to think Iraq was an ally in the 80s. I saw that on a map. Maybe it's wrong. Well, I know Iraq was an ally at some point of America. Maybe that was later. Or maybe I got a mistake somewhere. With the independent Czech Union declaring independence. With the Czech Union invading. With this Czech Union being pro-NATO, pro-Czech independence. With them declaring themselves independent. With Slovakia also having the same thing happen. As Slovakia and Croatia have declared their independence. But for now, they're still going to work as united. They still are united for now. With this basically meaning the Soviets' grip on power is falling apart. With the Hungarian people just declaring independence as if there's nothing better to do. And what's the problem with this happening? Well, this is weakening Russia's grip on power. With Iran being the only reasonable one in this group. And they actually leave the war. Because they're like, yeah, I have nothing better to do. I'll leave. Basically is what they do. As they start moving down the Albanian border where Greece forces are, they move up the Greek border. They're starting to set up supply lines through Yugoslavia. Well, better supply lines, so they can logistically manage to invade. With the Warsaw Pact falling apart rapidly, with Romania and Bulgaria just leaving the war, basically. With Russia infuriated by this, they also revolted, but they don't want to continue fighting. Because Bulgaria doesn't see any point in it. But Romania does, eventually, as they're told to join. As Romania realizes they can get lands out of Russia. At the Polish border, eventually the Russians are forced to leave Poland. As holding Turkey is becoming more and more of a disaster. As Turkish partisans and NATO forces are making major advances. Like, Turkey doesn't want to be held on. Like, there's no way the Russians are going to keep control on Turkey with all the naval landings and people rebellions within Turkey. Not communist people rebellions as in partisans against the annexer. With many Russian troops getting encircled here. With it being encircle city here. With an offensive being made here, which encircles another pocket of resistance. With this basically being the map of Turkey at this point. With the Russian troops that didn't flee are encircled. With Russia being kicked out of Turkey, an offensive is started by Poland into the Baltics. With different groups declaring their independence, including a Ukrainian Declaration of Independence, which looks like this. A Baltic Rebellion, which includes Baltic states. Belarusian Rebellion doesn't really happen. There's a lot of these rebellions having NATO forces being in them, but Russia didn't know about because they used, like, spies, basically. With Russia in a bad situation. With Turkey now starting an invasion from the south. Well, the re-established Turkish government. And as you can see, this is what the front line becomes. With the Soviets having no chance, they just leave the war, basically. Let's see how peace works. With Germany not getting anything from Poland. Because Poland wouldn't allow it. Let's see what happens next. A slightly bigger Slovakia, slightly bigger Hungary, slightly bigger Romania, a smaller Ukraine than it needs to be, but really it might be bigger because, well, it has Crimea and Donbass completely controlled. Belarus is a bit smaller, the Baltics are united, the Caucasus are united, and overall, the Middle East, all the governments were replaced because it would be a bit hard to design good borders there. So there never will be, no matter who draws them, I guess. And that's all that happens as NATO starts inviting other nations further east in and just rebuilding them. Basically, that's all they're doing. And that's pretty much all for today's video. Please like and subscribe. Wild Mapper out. Bye, guys.